Assuming I'm on time, this video will be released the day before the 2025 NFL Draft, and in this video, I'm going to be going over what I want the Seahawks to do in this draft. Now, I'm not going to pretend like I'm super knowledgeable about college football. I know next to nothing about most of these prospects, which is why I'm not going to be going in depth into which specific players I want the Seahawks to draft, because anything I could tell you about these players would just be information that I'm regurgitating from other people, which is not the kind of content I want to make. So instead, I'm just going to be giving a more general overview of the positions of need that I think the Seahawks have to address. Let's get the elephant in the room out of the way early. The interior offensive line is an unmitigated disaster. In fact, there's a good argument to be made that it's really the only bad position group the Seahawks have. Our linebacker room severely lacks depth, but at least we have two good starters. Our safety room lacks depth, but again, at least we have two good starters. But the interior offensive line is just a flat-out mess. What else is new? So, interior offensive line, or the offensive line in general, should be the top priority by a mile. But what's our next biggest need? I would say linebacker, defensive line, wide receiver, and safety are the next positions we should focus on. As I just alluded to, we have good linebackers and good safeties, but pitiful depth at both positions. The defensive line is very much the opposite. We've got loads of depth with guys like Jaron Reed, Byron Murphy, Boye Mafe, Derek Hall, Uchenna Nwosu, and DeMarcus Lawrence. But we're lacking a truly dominant player on our defensive line unless you count Leonard Williams. As for wide receiver, it's not exactly a weakness. Jackson Smith-Njigba is the star here, and we acquired good veterans in Cooper Kupp and MVS, but the latter two are getting up there in age. And while it's not a pressing need, it would be a good idea to add some young talent to the wide receiver room. Now that we've established what positions the Seahawks should be targeting, let's get into their draft picks. A few years back, we had 2 first-round picks, which we used to select Devin Witherspoon and JSN, but outside of that, I can't even remember the last time the Seahawks had this much ammo heading into the draft. We've got our first-round pick along with 2 second-round picks and 2 third-round picks, which is a lot to work with and makes this draft really interesting as a Seahawks fan. So what should the Seahawks do with those picks? Well, like I said, the offensive line should be the top priority, and as such, that's what our first round pick should be dedicated to. However, pick 18 doesn't seem high enough to get a premier player at the position. I think, if possible, the Seahawks should try trading up in this draft, even if it means burning a third round pick or something like that to do so. Let's assume the Seahawks are able to trade up into the first half of the first round. In that case, I think it's pretty simple. Pick the best offensive lineman you can. If we're stuck at pick 18, however, I see 2 options. Trade back and try to acquire more picks, or just draft the best player available at any position of need. If we still want an offensive lineman, but there's a much better linebacker prospect available at pick 18, I'd rather pick the linebacker even though offensive line is a bigger hole. And more or less that's the philosophy I would want to go through the rest of the draft with. I don't want to reach for a player that's not as good as someone else we could get, so whoever the best player among defensive linemen, linebackers, and offensive linemen is, I say we just take them. As for wide receiver, I feel like we should wait until the later rounds to address that position, for multiple reasons. Number 1, it's not as big a need as the other positions I mentioned, and 2, I think it's more likely that you can find a productive wide receiver in the 4th or 5th round than any of those other positions. To close out the video, let's just go over what I think is likely to happen. I expect the Seahawks to stay put at pick 18 and pick an offensive lineman, whether it's a reach or not. Our 2 second-round picks are just 2 picks apart from each other at 50 and 52, and I wouldn't be surprised to see the Seahawks double down on offensive line with at least one of those picks. The other I expect to be used on a defensive lineman or a linebacker. I'm expecting more defensive players in the 3rd round. More specifically, if we take a defensive lineman in the 2nd round, I expect a linebacker in the 3rd and vice versa. And maybe we even go for a safety here. Now, whether this happens in the 3rd round or in the later rounds, or maybe even the 2nd round for all I know, it also wouldn't really surprise me that much if the Seahawks took a flyer on a quarterback. I know this is considered a relatively weak quarterback class, but it wouldn't really upset me that much if the Seahawks used a 5th, 4th, or even a 3rd round pick on a project quarterback. But anyways, that's the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd rounds covered, and once we get to the 4th or 5th round, that's when I expect a wide receiver to be taken at some point. And once you get past those rounds, it's pretty much just a crapshoot, so position doesn't really matter as much as just trying to guess which players will be productive at all. So I'm not really going to be going over 7th round picks, because I think that could really be anything. Anyways, that's what I'm expecting from the Seahawks in this draft, so I hope nothing stupid happens. With that said, I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, remember to like and subscribe, and let me know what videos I should make next.